They say the Appalachian Mountains aren't just old, they're ancient, older than the bones of America itself, older than the stories we tell to make sense of the dark. The Cherokee once whispered that the ridges were alive, watching, keeping record of everything that happened beneath their shadows. Some folks in the coal towns still believe it. They say the mountains remember every sin, every scream, every secret that people tried to bury deep under the soil. And when the sun dips low, when the tree line turns black against the sky, that memory doesn't just sleep, it stirs. Travelers who've spent a night alone in these hills claim they've felt it, a presence, heavy as a storm, pressing down through the fog. Some describe it as if the ground itself were breathing beneath their boots, pulsing with something older than time. Others swear that in the stillness of night, when not even the crickets sing, they can hear voices threaded into the wind. Not voices of the living, but echoes, cries from miners who never came home, mothers calling out for children lost on the trails, laughter that doesn't belong to anyone you can see. Locals say the mountain fog isn't just weather, it's memory taking shape. White curling smoke that rolls low to the ground, wrapping around your legs, trying to lead you somewhere you don't want to go. Hikers have followed it, thinking it was just mist drifting through the pines. Hours later, they find themselves at abandoned foundations, collapsed mines, or forgotten cemeteries where crooked headstones lean like teeth. And always, the fog lifts just long enough to remind them they're being watched. Old-timers spit tobacco and shake their heads when outsiders laugh at these stories. The mountains don't forget, they mutter. You leave blood in the soil, it'll whisper about you for 100 years. They talk about families who tried to run from their past, bootleggers, killers, even whole clans that vanished after feuds. The mountains, they say, swallowed them, and sometimes their names still echo when the wind cuts down through the hollows, as if the earth itself is repeating them over and over, refusing to let the memory die. If you drive deep enough into the Appalachians, away from the lights, past the towns that barely hold on, you'll feel it for yourself. The silence changes, the trees lean closer, the shadows stretch longer. It's not just imagination, it's the weight of something alive beneath the soil, something that refuses to forget what's been buried. And if you linger too long, if you stay out after the last porch light goes out, you just might become one more memory the mountains decide to keep. Back in the 1970s, a group of hunters from a small West Virginia town claimed they stumbled on a place that didn't exist on any map. They were following deer tracks through the undergrowth when they came to a clearing that seemed too perfect, circular, quiet, and strangely untouched. No birds sang there. No squirrels darted through the branches. It was as if the hollow itself held its breath, waiting. The men joked about it at first, calling it God's front porch. But one of them, an older man who'd hunted the mountains all his life, wouldn't even step inside. He said the land looked wrong, like it had been scraped clean. The hunters who did enter noticed something odd right away. The air was heavy, thick enough to feel against their skin, like walking through water. The blackberry brambles around the edges twisted unnaturally, thorns curling inward as if they were guarding something. And though it was late fall, with the leaves already dead and brown everywhere else, the clearing's grass was strangely green, alive in a way it shouldn't have been. One of the men bent down to touch it and swore it pulsed under his fingers, like a slow heartbeat in the earth. Then came the whispers. At first, they thought it was just wind whistling through the trees. But when the voices grew clearer, every man froze. One swore he heard his name, called soft and low, the way his mother used to call him for supper when he was a boy. Another heard his dead brother's voice, pleading with him to come closer. The men stood shoulder to shoulder, guns gripped tight, but not a single one of them dared answer. They said the voices weren't coming from the trees. They were coming from the ground. The hunters left in a rush, stumbling back down the ridge, cursing at each other to move faster. But by morning, only 2 of them made it back to town. The third man, the one who had touched the grass, never returned. His truck stayed parked at the trailhead for weeks. His wife searched. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters circled overhead. Nothing. No boot prints past the clearing. No signs of struggle. Just gone. Folks said the mountain had taken him, like it had been waiting for him all along. Since then, locals refuse to even talk about that hollow. They say if you ask directions to it, you won't get an answer. Some claim the clearing still appears to strangers passing through, like it chooses who sees it. Others whisper that once you hear your name called in that hollow, it's already too late, because what lives under that patch of green earth doesn't let go. Deep in the back roads of West Virginia stands a wooden church that no one has prayed in for nearly a century. Its roof has caved in, the paint peeled away to bare grey boards, and weeds climb up the broken steps. The steeple itself leans so hard it looks like the next strong wind will topple it. But what makes it infamous is the bell that once hung there. Locals swear the bell was taken down and sold for scrap back in the 1940s. Yet even today, on some nights, people say they can hear it tolling across the valley. Slow, heavy, like a funeral service no one ever attended. The strangest part is the timing. The ringing never comes during storms or high winds, never when you might explain it away as the creak of wood or the groan of metal. It comes on clear nights when the sky is empty, when the moon glows so bright it paints the grass silver. Folks living in the hills nearby say the sound travels differently, low at first, then rising, echoing until it feels like the ground itself is humming beneath your feet. Some hear it once, others say it rings 7 times. No more, no less. And every toll feels like it's calling someone home. Back in the 1960s, a young couple parked their car near the church, trying to catch the bell on tape. They laughed when midnight came and went with silence. But around 12:37, the bell began to toll. The boy swore it shook the windshield, though no sound registered on his tape recorder. The girl claimed she saw shadows through the church's broken windows, rows of figures sitting in the pews, their heads bowed as though listening to a sermon. They drove off so fast, they left their tripod behind. And by morning, the camera had been crushed flat in the dirt, like something heavy had stepped on it. Stories like that spread quickly, and with each telling, the pattern grew clearer. Old-timers noticed that whenever the bell tolled, someone nearby went missing within the week. A miner walking home from a night shift, a child chasing fireflies too far into the woods, a woman whose car was found idling by the road with the driver's door wide open. None of them were ever found. The sheriff's reports mention natural disappearances, but families whisper about the church, the bell that calls, the pews that fill, the shadows that sit waiting even today. Hikers who camp too close to the ridge say they wake in the night to hear the low, metallic groan of a bell swinging where no bell exists. And worse, some swear they wake to the feeling of dozens of unseen eyes watching from the darkness, as if the congregation inside that ruined church is waiting for them to step closer, waiting for the next soul to join their midnight service. Along Route 52, where the road snakes tight against the mountainside, there's a farmhouse that seems frozen in time. The paint long ago peeled down to bare wood, the porch sags under its own weight, and the roofline buckles like a spine giving out. Locals say the house hasn't been lived in since the 1930s, after the family inside vanished without explanation. There's no electricity, no plumbing, not even furniture left. Just a hollow shell of a home rotting on the edge of the woods. And yet, countless drivers swear that someone still lives there. They describe her as a woman standing at the upstairs window, a faint candle in her hand, the flame flickering against glass that's long been shattered. Her face is pale, almost grey, with hollowed eyes that seem too deep for a living person. She never moves, never waves, never looks away. She just stares out into the road, like she's waiting for someone. The strange part is, no two drivers can agree on what she's wearing. Some say an old-fashioned dress with lace sleeves. Others a plain nightgown, dirt-stained and torn. But they all agree on one detail. Her mouth is slightly open, like she's about to speak. Back in the 1980s, a trucker hauling coal swerved off the road after claiming the woman stepped out from the window and appeared in the middle of the highway. His rig jackknifed, spilling coal across both lanes. But when rescuers arrived, they found him dead. His eyes wide, frozen in terror, his hands still locked on the wheel. No skid marks, no sign he ever hit the brakes. Just the echo of his last words caught on his CB radio. She's in the road. She's right there. Police have investigated the house more than once, but every time they step inside, the same thing happens. Their equipment fails. Radios go to static. Flashlights flicker out. Even batteries drained brand new refuse to work. Officers describe a smell inside. Faint but undeniable. Candle wax and smoke, like someone has been burning a flame. Upstairs, one deputy quit the force altogether after claiming he heard someone whisper his name in the empty hallway. A woman's voice so close, he swore he felt her breath on his ear. Still today, if you drive that stretch of Route 52 after midnight, you might catch sight of her. A pale figure framed in the jagged glass of a broken window, holding a single light that shouldn't exist, staring out with eyes too dark to belong to the living. And if you're unlucky enough to lock eyes with her in your rearview mirror, some say you won't make it past the next bend in the road. In the hills of eastern Kentucky, there's a coal shaft the locals refuse to go near. It was dug back in the 1930s and abandoned after only a few years, when miners swore something unnatural lived inside. The tunnel, narrow and half collapsed, seemed to breathe. Not just the usual drafts of air you'd expect underground, but long, steady gusts, exhaling warm, damp air like something alive was lying just beneath the rock. The miners joked at first, calling it the mountain's lungs. But even laughter sounded hollow down there, as if the earth was listening. Some men claimed the breaths weren't random. They came in a rhythm, slow and deliberate, like the heaving of a chest. The air even carried a smell. Iron and sulfur, with a hint of rot, like meat left too long in the sun. When the drafts grew stronger, lanterns flickered and tools rattled against the stone walls. More than one miner swore he heard faint groans carried on those winds, deep and low, as though something massive was shifting just beyond the thin barrier of rock. A foreman ordered the men to ignore it. Days later, half his crew walked off the job, refusing to go back underground. Those who stayed began to suffer strange dreams. They'd wake in the bunkhouse gasping for breath, swearing they'd been suffocated by heavy air, pressing down on their chests. One miner carved a warning into his bed frame, before vanishing without a trace. It knows when we sleep. The others found his boots still by the door, his lamp still burning, but no sign of him anywhere. Search dogs brought in refused to step past the mine's entrance. They barked, whined, and finally laid down, tails tucked tight, as though refusing to cross into something not meant for man. The company tried sealing the shaft, pouring concrete at the opening. For a while, people thought that would be the end of it. But months later, cracks began to form in the ground nearby, thin fissures that released hot air in steady bursts. Children in the holler reported hearing a low sighing sound at night, as though the earth itself was restless. And when the wind blew just right, folks claimed they could hear the exhalations echoing down the valley, carrying whispers too faint to understand, but sharp enough to raise every hair on your arms. Even now, the mine lies hidden under vines and rusting machinery, a scar on the mountain no one dares disturb. The earth around it feels different, softer, like it's hollow beneath the surface. If you stand at the mouth of that tunnel on a still night, you'll feel it. a slow gust pushing against your skin. Warm and wet, like the breath of something waiting in the dark. Something too large to imagine, too patient to reveal itself. But always awake. Hikers along the Appalachian Trail have passed down the same unsettling story for years. Deep in the woods, far from towns or camps, a lullaby drifts through the night air. It doesn't come from radios, or camps nearby, or even from other hikers. It comes from the dark itself. The song is soft, almost tender, sung in a woman's voice that feels both soothing and wrong. Some say the tune is familiar, like something they half remember from childhood, while others swear they've never heard it before. Either way, the sound draws you closer, like it was made only for you. At first, the melody feels harmless, gentle notes floating through the pines, just enough to make your chest tighten with strange nostalgia. But the longer you listen, the stranger it becomes. The rhythm never falters, never stumbles, never changes key. It repeats, perfectly, as if whoever sings it isn't human at all, but something programmed to imitate humanity. Those who've heard it say, it carries no emotion, no grief, no joy, no warmth, just a hollow sweetness that seems to mask something colder underneath. Rangers have collected stories from hikers who followed the sound. Most never made it far before fear pulled them back. They described how the voice always seemed just ahead, no matter how fast they walked. One man swore he reached a clearing where the moonlight fell across the grass, and the singing grew so close, he thought he could reach out and touch the singer. But when he stepped forward, the air went ice cold, and the melody shifted. It was no longer ahead of him. It was behind. Campsites have been found abandoned after reports of the lullaby. Tents slashed open, sleeping bags dragged across the dirt, backpacks left behind as if their owners had no time to pack. One ranger found a camera, half buried in the soil, its lens cracked, but the film still intact. When developed, the last frame showed nothing but the woods at night, except for a faint blur in the corner. A woman's outline, too thin, too tall, her mouth open mid-song, though her eyes were nothing but pits of darkness. Locals warn hikers not to whistle or hum when the woods grow quiet. They say the song listens, and if it hears music, it will answer. And once it sings back, you're already marked, no matter how far you travel, how many towns you run through, or how tightly you shut your ears at night. The voice will find you again, softer, closer, until you can't resist anymore. And you follow it, into the dark. In every Appalachian town, no matter how small, you'll find an old-timer willing to tell you a story. But what most outsiders don't realize is that those stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings, passed down like family heirlooms, carried in whispers around wood stoves and front porches. The mountains demand respect, they'll say, and if you don't give it, they'll take something from you in return. Not tomorrow, not next week, but eventually when you least expect it. The warnings are always the same. Don't answer when you hear your name in the woods, because whatever's calling isn't someone you know. Don't follow lights that drift through the hollows, no matter how much they look like lanterns guiding you home. And don't look too long into windows of abandoned houses, because sometimes what's inside is looking back at you. Outsiders laugh these rules off, but locals follow them like gospel, not out of fear, but out of survival. There's a particular kind of silence in the Appalachians that comes before the danger. Birds stop singing, crickets go still, and the forest seems to hold its breath. Old folks say that's the mountains waiting to see what you'll do. Whether you'll be smart enough to turn around, or foolish enough to press deeper. If you ignore that silence, if you keep walking, that's when the real stories begin. Some don't even need to be told. You'll find them yourself in the boot prints that lead into the trees but never come back out. Families talk about curses, not as myths, but as everyday truths. A man cheats his neighbor and suddenly his cattle go dry. A woman mocks the old tales, and a week later, her daughter goes missing in the fog. Folks believe the mountains keep balance, like a living ledger that never erases a debt. You might think you've gotten away with something, but the land never forgets. It waits, patient and quiet, until the night it decides to collect. Those who've grown up here will tell you, the stories don't belong to the past. They're happening still, every night, somewhere in the ridges and hollows. That's why the warnings are whispered to children, before they can even walk the trails. Not to scare them, but to teach them how to listen. Because once the mountains have called your name, once they've turned their eyes toward you, there may not be a way back. So when night falls over the Appalachians, and the fog creeps low across the valleys, remember, these mountains are not just scenery. They are alive. They are listening. Every whisper in the hollows, every echo through the trees, every strange light on the ridges is a reminder. The Appalachians do not forget, and they do not forgive. Some say the stories are nothing but legends, old tales to keep children in line. But others, they've heard the voices, seen the figures, followed the songs, and not all of them came back to tell what they found. So if you ever find yourself traveling these roads after dark, take the warnings to heart. Don't stop when you hear your name. Don't follow the music. Don't look too long into the windows, because once the mountains take notice of you, you may just become the next story whispered in the dark.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.